Um, let me sort of expand on how I'm here today. Susu did a really good job, kind of giving you a little bit of background, but I am an engineer. I studied electrical engineering and computer science in undergrad, and then went to get my MBA at University of Denver. My undergrad was at University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee, so I'm a cheesehead. I'm still a Packer fan, and so I'm a very analytical science kind of geek, with that type of education, and I do love finance. But the real trigger was having kids. So I'm going to share with you the journey that I went on and that I've worked with other parents in how to teach kids about finance. And if you were expecting to learn about the power of compounding interest and how to budget, that's not what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about sort of the relationship you have with your kids or family members, and I'm hopeful. The way I think of things is you all have your parenting toolkit, and what I'm hoping today is that you can walk away from this with some extra tools in your toolkit and thinking a little different. So that's because when my kids were, I have 3 kids. My oldest is 29. My daughter turns 28 in April, and then my youngest is 25. And but rewind to when they were like 11, 12, spanning from 7 to about 12. I was asking the same questions you're probably asking. How do I raise kids to be, financially fit? And I believe in this. Have any of you ever heard of Stephen Covey? He has this the 7 habits, and one of my favorite is begin with the end in mind. So if you sort of project yourself forward, well, I want to have a financially fit young adult. Well, what do you need to do to get there? So that was the mindset I took, and unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of material out there, and I still believe there. I think it's better now, but I still think it's not well thought out, and prescribed. So there's the onus is on you as parents. So, but before we get into it, I wanted to ask you. I'm going to throw this question out. When you saw this topic, what did and you were driving here today? What were you hoping to get out of this conversation? What's some key things? Go ahead and shout it out, or anybody? Tools for financial independence? Yeah.
As kids are growing up in the age of Venmo or credit cards, how to appreciate the value of money.
Good. Yep. How to save their money. Up here it was how to use tool in the realm of Venmo and electronic transactions. How do kids work on that? Any other thoughts?
Going through the college application process, learning about colleges, what do those discussions look like? How $1,000 are you listed?
I've got a story that I'll tell you about. So my daughter is she all of my kids went to Colorado State University, so they're all Rams. My wife is a Buff, and then I'm a Pioneer from DU. But I'm gonna tell you a story about. It was a tense, almost fight-like between my daughter and me related to college and finances, and so I'll tell you that story. Again, it's going to come back to the relationship is really what was key. Well, let me. Oh.
How old is
I am absolutely going to talk about that, and probably slant more towards the debit card to start out. But I think just a few slides into this, you're going to go, whoa! I can't believe what Craig's throwing out there, and I'll tell us. I'm not going to. This talk is. I'd like it to be interactive. Feel free to ask questions. I don't have a rigid script. I have a library of stories and topics that I can talk to, and I kind of use the slide deck as just a guide, for us to go. So don't feel offended if you're, want to ask a question and all. But the first thing that I want to do is, are your kids ready? So going through this, begin with the end in mind. So a real experience is my youngest. We went up to Colorado State University for the orientation of new students, new freshmen. So and that is it might even be 2 days. There's multiple sessions that they take kids through and parents, and it's what to expect on campus and topics on sexual harassment and the food plan and the dorms and all of that. Well, one of the topics, there was about 150 people in the room, and the question that the MC threw out was, how many of you have kids that are ready to make financial decisions on their own? Any ideas what that response was? Well, for my wife and I, we actually raised our hand, and there was, but you're mostly right. There was a small number of people, and there was almost just like this, a little bit of chuckling and laughing that, kids aren't really ready, and I believe that type of feeling was happening across college campuses across the country. So again, we're going to talk about what can you do, and not every kid is destined for college. So what we're going to talk about isn't to prep for college necessarily. It's for the next stage of life, a young adult. So I was worried too, and I had mentioned the tools seemed sparse. There were there's the Dave Ramseys of the world, which Dave Ramsey is, I sort of think of it as he's like the surgeon. You already got yourself into trouble. He's got programs and topics to help you get out of debt, and get back on track. I wanted to be preventative medicine. What can you do to help your kids grow into and not need a Dave Ramsey, for that. But there's a lot of concepts that Dave talks about that do carry over. Some of them I'm not sure I agree with, and I can talk about some of those. But and a lot of them, I don't know if. I think Cherry Creek has personal finance class, available. My kids all went to, we grew up in Parker, so they went to Chaparral, and they had a personal finance class. And I remember asking them at the end of the class, what did they think? And they said, we learned more from you, Dad, than we, and I think you'll understand why as we finish up today. So that was a big one. But I also wanted a real world process. This, if you read a book, I think the next one is this. I'll get to it. But I really wanted to become confident in raising my hand and allow parents to be confident if you're sitting in, a session, at CSU or any college, that you could raise your hand. So what is the best way to learn skills? It could be anything, What's the best way to learn? Yeah. Was hands-on action, learning, right? Is any other thoughts? Practice. So true. So this is my son, Scott. And, if I just handed him a guitar for the very first time, so we're being kind of silly here, would he know how to play it if he didn't see, somebody or a coach or to help him? Probably not. Some instruction goes a long way, but then it gets to that practice. So we learn by doing. So all of you are spot on that learn by doing, the practice, getting involved. You can't just read a book or listen to a seminar or take a class necessarily and then be an expert after that. You actually have to put it in practice. There's a pattern that, and this is me drawing a chart that a pattern that is true for almost everything. So learning new things, if we don't, we return to the starting point without use and reinforcement. So, using a silly example like my golf swing, I could learn to, see a coach and iron out my slice. But if I don't continue practicing, I return back to zero. So what we want to do is change the trajectory. And you reinforce by activities and practice. So that's key, is incorporating financial skills and activities into your day-to-day practice. So there's a model out there that is called the 70-20-10 model. And it, just like all of you were saying, 70% experiential, 20% coaching, and 10% classroom is what that model is based on. And again, it's learning by doing. And so as I was diving into, how to teach my kids, finances, I started drawing on these perspectives and my own experience with the kids. What if the formula was reversed for driving, as many do with finances? Because honestly, if you think about it, society has us doing just the opposite. Spend all the time in a personal finance class. Read this book, and you'll learn about finances, and then a small percent in practice. But what if we did that with driving? You would have 70% classroom and all. So what you would have is your kids. You're not going to have your kids go and take the driving class, read a book, and then say, "Here's the keys. Drive to Grand Junction for the day." It would be disastrous, right? What do you do? Is there's some coaching, there's some reading, but then there's also driving with a parent or an instructor and practice, and then the driving log. I remember our kids had to get a lot of experience driving. So any ideas? Okay, so this is where I was at the journey. Now I'm sitting there going, okay, how do I bring this to light? How do I teach my kids? Does anybody have any idea where I'm going? What's that? Well, kind of. I'm basically going to bring I'm going to bring them in the fold and allow them to make financial decisions. First, this is my family without their spouses, so this is a little dated of a picture. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about my kids. And so my oldest, Scott, we all grew up in Parker. And they went to Chaparral High School and then to Colorado State University. We're literally a family of nerds. My boys are engineers like I am, and so Scott is he moved to with his wife to San Antonio, largely because Colorado has become very difficult to start a family and buy a house. So he could afford that down there, and he got a good job. He's a mechanical engineer. And my daughter on the right there is she finished medical school. She went to Creighton after Colorado State, and she graduated last year. And won a very esteemed residency in Cincinnati at University of Cincinnati in their cardiothoracic surgery program. So she's going to be a heart-lung surgeon. And then Tyler is also a mechanical engineer. He works up at Woodward in Fort Collins, and got engaged over the holidays. So he's doing really well. So no kids living in the basement, and I will tell you, because of what we're talking about today, the thing as any parent, of course I worry about my kids every day, but one of the things I worry least about is finances, because they all have a really, really strong financial head on their shoulders. And I am a little worried about my daughter because she has medical school is not inexpensive, and mom and dad did not pay for medical school. So and we'll get into that a little bit later. So here's a little video that I think is kind of funny. A lot of people talking about money with their kids is very nerve-wracking. So
actually, this is good, because I've been meaning to talk to you. Well, you're getting older, and you might be experiencing some sensations. Happened to your dad. Oh,
look, the tow truck's here.
Can't wait to be rescued.
There are a lot of people that feel that way, more nervous. I've talked to a number of parents that are more comfortable having the sex talk with their kids than talking about money. I kid you not. So I tried to dive into why that is, and I finally learned one of the best explanations. Have any of you heard of Brené Brown? Oh, she's awesome. She's got a book out called Daring Greatly, and I do a lot of reading, and and her talk is about the vulnerability, being vulnerable. And I think as a parent, when you're talking with your kids about money, it taps into a vulnerability that is different than having the sex talk. Is what I believe. And so it is hard. It is hard. You've got to be a little bit vulnerable. But I will tell you, if you open up and be a little vulnerable with your kids, your relationship will go to a different level on this. And so here's what I did. The first kids to my two oldest kids, Scott was 12, my daughter was 11 when I was hitting this part of the journey. So it was, 16, 17 years ago. I said, well, I'm going to allow my kids to manage money. I'm actually literally going to turn things over. So I said, what are things that we're spending money on with our kids? Allowance, entertainment, clothing, birthday parties, hot lunches, and school supplies. And now the one that raises eyebrows all the time is clothing and shoes, and I've got some funny stories about that. But I literally went through a budgeting process and said, I'm spending X amount of money on each kid for these things. Instead of me spending it, give them the money and let them spend it. And so now they're in the game. They're in the game making the decisions. They're getting that practice real time. So we rolled this out at Christmas of that particular year. And the middle school, they were still in middle school. And what they, I wonder if I have it here. So in the example, now with costs nowadays, this is going to seem so cheap, but you get the idea. We basically gave them 4 expenses, and I'll get into some of the investing stuff and what we did for that here in a little bit. But every month, we gave an 11 and 12-year-old $105 a month, and it was interesting. So it was do I go and do I imagine your kids doing getting $105 when they're used to just mom and dad buying everything, and I could buy a lot of candy, I could buy a lot of different things, and I will tell you that it's still worth doing, even if they do buy some candy and go overboard, because guess what's going to happen when they go off to college? They do that anyway, and so the idea is, while you have them at home, allow them to do these things in practice, and you're there to coach them, and it makes a big difference. So one funny story, and I do have this in the book, is in middle school I mentioned hot lunches. Hot lunches are something that the middle school they gave out a menu at the beginning of the month, and you had to select what days you wanted, and on average, our kids were spending or buying 2 hot lunches per week, and I don't remember if it was $3 a lunch or whatever. It's probably more than that now. But let's say I think it came out to $20 or $25 a month that we allocated for them to spend on hot lunches. So in that $105, some of that was for hot lunches. When it came down to it, I said, okay, you guys have to write me a check. What I did also, to clarify, is part of this program, we went ahead and set up a checking account for them. And in fact, I did it all at First Bank, and you can do this at any bank. What's that? I started 11 and 12 with them, and I've got a funny story about, because even then, First Bank, I attached a debit card to the checking account, so they had a debit card that they can use, and we ran into an obstacle when my youngest, was old enough to do that, but they had a debit card, and they could write checks, and so they were going to write a check for the hot lunches, and when it came down to it, they were like, "Do we need to buy hot lunch, Dad?" And I said, well, no. You the other days of the week, you always were packing your lunch anyway. I kid you not, they never bought a hot lunch again. They did not, and so they chose to spend their pool of that. It was so mind-boggling to me the first time. It was like, wow, when you're spending mom and dad's money, it doesn't matter. But when they're spending their own money, their behavior changed, and it really it was eye-opening, and I'll tell some more stories as we get into it. Clothing and shoes is one that you'll start to see. If you do this, you'll start to see a personality emerge with all of your kids, and they're all different. I'll tell you. My son Scott, he was pretty balanced. I remember my daughter loved to spend. She was a spender, and she liked to go to buy clothes and do all of that. And she would spend all $500, or not $500, $105, like the first part of the month, and so she did that one month, and then she got invited to a birthday party with one of her best friends, And then she came to me and almost in tears, like, what do? I can't buy a birthday present for, I don't remember her friend's name, but it was a very good friend. And she and this, I will tell you, this is the hardest part as a parent. I didn't say these words, but I was like, sucks to be you. and because I said no, she was like, can I borrow a hat? And this was this slippery slope, right? That I didn't want her to add that to her toolkit, that, I'll just borrow. And at least not at that age. So she storms upstairs and tears just all over the place. And of course I'm going, wow, am I doing the right thing? I'm asking those questions that every parent is going to ask. She comes out, I don't know, say 20, 30 minutes later, and she goes down in the basement, and we have this craft, room with a bunch of stuff. And she went and she made this, and we happened to have material to make like a blanket where you can tie the ends and all, and there was a pattern, and she got after it and made the birthday gift for her friend, and she went to the party, gave it, and I remember her coming back, and she said that it was her friend's favorite gift, and it was, and so at that point I was like, whew, I was worried that I was making a mistake, but what a lesson. And again, that kind of thing does not occur by reading a book. It's you can't make that up. It was life. It was, I don't have enough money in my account. Now my daughter went on to continually spend money, so it didn't. In fact, a little bit before she graduated high school, she goes, Dad, I've learned something about myself. There's, in the financial, there's the, the spending and all this. She goes, rather than cutting back my spending, I've learned that I've got to make the top line better or bigger. So, and I think she's always wanted to be a doctor. So, but that kind of reinforced it. Yeah. Yep. Great question. So the question is extracurricular activities and expenses like that. I did not pass those on. There were things that I still, as parents, we covered. So sporting fees, extracurricular, whatever those might be. So I, and that's why I kind of say age-appropriate expenses. Because if you want, let's say music lessons, and that's something, I'm not sure I wanted to put my kids in a position where I don't want to take piano lessons, and so I would hold back, and then as they get older, you can sort of, as a parent, discern what expenses they're responsible for. When they started driving, for example, they were responsible for their own gas money, so we upped the budget, those type of things. Great question though, because that is, but you're still the parent here. You're still the parent. And when you set up these accounts, what you're going to have to co-sign, and you can monitor everything that they spend. So if they're you can log into the website and see, they spent money here, which, you could see. I don't know if I would do an Amazon account today because they didn't have it back then, when, but in a way, asking the question about what do you do with all the electronic, I might, because that's life, and I think it's your kids are going to learn by doing, going back to what we started with. How do you learn this stuff unless you're practicing it and doing it on a daily basis? So, great question. Thank you for asking that. So the concept of paying yourself first. So I'm sure, if you've done any research on finances and the power of compound interest and all of that, you have heard about this. Does anybody, can anybody quickly, say what this is? Yep. Well, and a lot of it is you pay for the things that are important first, and we as a society tend to do the pay ourselves last, so this was a concept that I wanted to instill in our kids while they were young. So and this is the part as a parent that I usually say you're investing in this. So we actually said, I'm going to say, the accounts we set up, we said that we would, I don't remember if it was $180 was their actual monthly. Now you're going, well, you said 105. Well, it started out as 180, 10% went to savings, so we set up a savings. Another 10% went to charity. And then I had another account that I called 401 Kids, 401k, and Dad matched dollar for dollar, so it was a pretty darn good investment for the kids. So I do believe that setting up accounts for the kids. So in addition to that checking account where you run everything through, have a savings account. Have to be honest, the 401k account was just another savings account. You just label it that, and but you could have accounts for everything. I do believe that having separate accounts to move money into. We had a charity account that you would move 10% into that, and then that's where they gave from. So they could you could give at church or anything that where your heart desires, and you already spent it because it's not in your checking account. You already moved it out. So, I still to this day, if you look at in Quicken, I'm a Quicken user. I have an injury prevention account, and it's basically financial injury prevention is what I call it. So, and it's an emergency account, and I want to fund that. And I get asked this a lot. Really, Craig, at 11 years old, you need an emergency account? And you do, because as they got older, here was when they started getting phones, my daughter, a lot of examples were around my daughter. She broke her screen on her iPhone, and I think we had an deductible, of which she paid for with her emergency account. So I explained that's what that's for, to help keep. Because what happens to us as adults, if you don't have this and you go into debt, you put it on a credit card, but by having this account, and you can draw on funds, to again, pay for something unexpected, but it prevents you from injuring the rest of your financial plan. So hence, that's why I called it the injury prevention. And then long-term savings and charity. So this was the basis for our kids at 11 and 12 years old. And I'm asked all the time, gosh, that seems young. I was amazed at our kids walked taller. I kid you not. They walked taller. There was a confidence about them. And we went right after we rolled this out, where we had a check and a debit card. We went on some field trips. I call them, it was essentially the first one was field trip to the bank. We're going to, grandma gave a Christmas check to deposit in your checking account. How do you do a deposit check? And so we went there, and it was, here's the slip, and you fill it out. And my son, this again, so fun. He's kind of a perfectionist. He's very nervous about doing things wrong. So he's going, am I doing this right? Am I doing this right? Nope, you're filling this out right, Scott, and in the meantime, his younger sister was already at the window depositing the check. She just sort of dives in. Then we went to an ATM machine and said, okay, how do you take money out? And go through that. And it was just eye-opening how the learning, it was exceptional. Then we went to a store to buy something using the debit card, and so they learned what that was like. I will tell you, I don't know if this would happen nowadays, but if you rewind 15 years ago, I can't tell you the number of times I had other parents comment to me negatively, about what I was doing with my kids. So picture this. We were in Target one time, and we were, my daughter, I think it was my daughter, needed a swimsuit. She had grown, her old one was a little small, so, and clothes and stuff, again, that's where, she was responsible for that. So, her and I went to Target, and she picked out a swimsuit, and we go to, and she wanted to do it herself. So she's right in front of me, and and she's proud. She whips out her debit card. The cashier is she sees that I'm her father, and it was kind of a proud moment. Until the woman behind me says, "You're messing your kids up," and she, and I just ignored her, but I would get comments like that all the time that because they think it's a credit card, and they don't know what was going on. I will tell you, over time, the entertainment value of the comments that come from the peanut gallery do get kind of humorous. But again, the theme here, the overarching theme is your kids are in the game. They're in the game. They're learning. They're learning about everything. I think a few years after we did this, my son, I think, the bank called up and canceled his debit card because they suspected fraud. And I think it was legit, and so he was like, "Dad, I didn't do anything," and I was like, "Honey, this actually happens to every adult that has had a credit card or whatever." So I explained, what happened. Maybe you've got to protect your credit card better. Somebody, and the bank, 2 days later, he had a replacement. So, but that again, this is why it's so awesome to do it while they're still at home, because they can talk to you and you can coach them through this. While the kids were up at CSU, there was a fraud is a big deal now, right? There was an episode where I think in this case my daughter calls up and says, "Dad, I got this phone call from so-and-so that said that if I didn't pay, $3,000, they were going to cancel my enrollment in college." And and what happened was somebody hacked into and got the accounts or the names and email addresses of students at CSU. So then they went on a campaign to try to rip them off. so she's worried, about what happened, and so she calls me, and I said, well, first off, honey, you didn't make $3,000 last year in taxes, to pay, but I again just coached her through it, talked her off the ledge because she was pretty upset, and then the conversation that ensued was around that there's bad actors out there trying to rip you off, and so I was worried about my older son who was on campus at the same time, and so I don't know if I called or texted him. I was like, "Hey Scott, there's an attack going around or a hack that's going around. Did you run into that?" His response was, "Oh yeah, Dad, I saw that a million miles away." So, which made me proud that because he was in the game, doing all of this, that they could do that. So what about the role of parents? Now, I think I can't understate the importance that all of you play in raising your kids. I in fact think we have a parenting crisis in this country, that parents are so important to our kids and our young ones, and so these are some stats. Ironically, they might be a little dated, but then again, they might even be worse now. So more than 30% of teens do not believe they will be financially independent of their parents by the age of 30. I actually think that the age has gone up. So, the number of kids that are living at home and in the basement. Most teens turn to their parents or caregivers for financial advice. There is a lot on social media, that I'm not sure it's all sound. But again, it comes back to so important as a parent, to establish those life skills while your kids are at home. So I mentioned here's the thing, the role of coach. I was this was scary for me. So you might be saying, wow, kind of like the commercial on the sex talk. What would my kids think of me? I at the time I didn't have a perfect financial. I had some medical debt at the time, and that was reported to a collection agency, or actually years before. So I didn't have a pristine financial record, and so I was like, how can I be a coach? If I have, scars on my financial background. So I was nervous about that, and I still ventured into it, and I will tell you, from what I've learned in talking with a lot of parents, if you have some scars or issues, you probably are going to be a better coach. So, and the reason I've said that and I've witnessed it is, you have a question? Mm-hmm.
My wife grew up in Miles Pine. We go to the doctor. She made like $40 a month. And now we're comfortable. But if she thought only now matters, that we're comfortable now, that would be a bad picture, I think.
Yeah. I think because you shared that, I'm going to go out on a limb because I don't know the whole story. I bet you have a pretty darn good relationship with her.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's.
I think modeling what we do, and my wife and I ended up having my own business as a financial guy. I had an advisory firm. And we show what we did.
Yeah.
And she's remarkably independent now. And
that's terrific. So you're, and that's exactly what I'm saying is, be transparent. The relationship to this day. So my kids are all grown like yours.
no.
Oh, they're not grown.
No. My daughter's going to be going to college next year.
Okay. But it sounds like she's but throughout life you're going to I mentioned that my oldest son moved to San Antonio and they bought a house last year. So I got calls, Dad, what should I look? He's to this day he still sees me as a coach on those type of things. But I also reinforce the fact that it's his decision. I'm not going to say you should buy this house or that house, but I'm going to say, these are the things to look for in terms of mortgage and those type of things. But it's all right to be nervous about being a coach. A financial coach, even if you don't know if you're sound enough to be a financial coach. This gets into the Brené Brown book, Daring Greatly, where she talks about that vulnerability. I felt very vulnerable, but it actually played out really well. So what are some? Let's look at 5 key elements of a great coach. Coaches understand and build confidence. You need to help develop their confidence. So this is true of any coach. I highlight this. I even highlight it in the book because it's if you think about your best teacher or best coach that you've ever had in your life, you're going to see some of these things. They helped grow my confidence. The other one was coaches are tough but fair. This is hard. So when my daughter had that birthday party, it was excruciating for me to say, I'm not going to loan you money, and you've got to figure it out. It really was, and Kate.
They're trying to bail themselves out and take a quick job.
Awesome. So the question was, are there ways that your kids come to you to make more money? And the answer is yes, and we implemented that. So and one was lawn mowing, various projects. I mean, and again, what I'm laying out to you is not an exact recipe. This is what I want to do is add to your toolkit to think a little different. And the answer is yes. It could be shoveling snow, lawnmower. We had, in fact, I would put stain protectant on the fence. They did that. And then as they got older, my kids actually, 2 of them worked at the Chick-fil-A in Parker for many years, through high school. So they got jobs, but then the question is do you change your salary? What you're paying them, and I did not. There were things that, again, I was responsible for, and I think over time the salary did go up, but the goal wasn't to cover everything in their life. And so there was a bit of a motivation. I think my daughter did babysitting also, so it's great when they can do that. And then also, what if they they get birthday money or Christmas money from grandma and grandpa? Now, what we usually did is we would say, let's say it was $100 that well, you should have 10% of that go into, the savings, 10% goes into, charity and well, Dad, what if I put all $100 into the 401k? Would you match dollar for dollar? And that caught me off guard when that question did come up. And I think I answered I would, but I also knew that they weren't going to put all $100 in. But
I have a question. So, regarding that, so this past Christmas, my daughter asked for something specific from her grandparents, and they bought it for her. And then my son said, I just want the money that she got. So the grandparents wrote him a check for the same amount that she spent on the gift. And my husband was like, well, 10% must go on the savings and 10% must go on the charity. And I said, but why? Because she got to spend it all on the jewelry that she wanted. So why can't he just spend it all?
yeah,
So, like, he ended up putting some in savings. But, I mean, he's been chicken away. There's been a lot of sand to go through.
yeah.
So, what's the answer there?
So I'm not going to give an exact answer because what the answer should be that you should have a dialogue on it. Is it fair? Is it, should you? And I will be honest, I also learned some things about myself. I was kind of a softie on a number of things. I probably would have just said, yeah, you don't need to put anything, So, because there is no steadfast answer, but we did put, guardrails up that it's good to fund the charity and all of that. So, in that particular situation, I'm not sure I would have done any different myself. In fact, my kids would they got really smart about inviting me to do things that they knew I would cover, like, Dad, do you want to go out for ice cream? And I would go, well, yeah, are you asking because you want to or because I'll pay for it? And well, maybe a little bit of both, Dad, and so, and then of course, if we went out and did things, if we went to the movies or we did things, Dad, Mom and Dad covered a lot of it. This does not replace you being a parent. It's you should enjoy those activities. So probably a key thing is think of these as guidelines. My hope is that you walk out of here just thinking a little different in how to engage your kids in the game. The game of life and finances. That's the importance. So the conversation is the most important part. That be open to a conversation, and it's okay to be a softie. At times. I certainly did a lot. You had a question? Okay. On like.
So for example, I'm all about I gave my daughter in second grade a budget for her school expenses, and had her decide I want to spend it on plastic, I want to spend it on and I started doing that, and then my spouse was just no, I'll cover you, no, I'll cover you, no. So there's a discrepancy that facilitating that discussion between the adults more when one's doing this.
Oh, yeah, and I have run into this in conversations, and I'll confess, I think it's going to be hard if you're not on the same page with your spouse, because and I've run into parents that say, yeah, Craig, I get everything you're talking about, I'm not strong enough to do it, and then they don't, so and some of you may feel that way, that this is not for you, but if you're not on the same page, man, are kids smart. They'll go, well, I'm going to Mom for this. I go to Dad for that. I don't know if I have a good answer for that. I think that's something that, if you can come to a compromise on what, is covered, that's probably, yeah. Well, in the book, so the book is titled, how to raise a financially fit tween. So, and because another question that's very common is, what's the right age to start? Most of the time I say today, regardless of the age, and it's, but there's age appropriateness, and you as a parent are going to know that your spidey sense is going to go off, and you're going to go, oh, they're ready for this. And adults, I everything that I'm mentioning here, I've implemented and still do, today. So this isn't. I have separate accounts. I have an injury prevention fund. I have a charity account that every month I move money into. All of that is, so it's not specific to age. But the book doesn't cover things like college. So I mentioned I got into a really big argument with my daughter on college. And I know a lot of you are thinking about what, how do we do that? And so one of the, and my daughter was especially focused on, she knew she wanted to go to college. Ultimately, she wanted to go to med school. Now, as a parent, and again, I'm just telling you what I did. This does not mean it pertains to all of you. But I said, we will help you through undergrad. I'm not paying for med school. Because it was very expensive, and my wife and I hope to retire at someday. But my daughter, when she was picking undergrad schools, it came down to between Colorado State University and Marquette University in Milwaukee. Marquette University did offer a scholarship at their private school, and they but it would have, and they required an extra year. My daughter had like a bunch of AP classes. She could go through the program at CSU in 3 years, and Marquette was going to take 4 years, and the net effect was, not including travel and all that, it was over $100,000 more. And so, and I was pretty steadfast against not doing, Parent Plus loans and all of that, because I was worried about what it would do to my financial future. And whereas we did save enough to cover in-state tuition, at least most of it. Oh my God, we had some major discussions on this, and what a horrible dad I was that I wasn't willing to, pay for that. And but what was really eye-opening is we went up and visited Marquette, and I was standing in this the back of the. I don't know if any of you have ever been to a med school or pre-med program. When you go on a tour, they took us to a cadaver lab. So not my thing. I'm an engineer, I'm not the. So we're sitting. I'm sitting with the professor, and all these high school kids are playing with brains, and there's cadavers, and again, not my thing. I made sure I stood far enough away, but I was talking to the professor about the program, and I said, and I happened to say, you know what? There was my daughter's also looking at CSU in their health sciences program, and lo and behold, she goes, oh, I know so and so. We helped them start their program there, and so I walked away going, it's essentially the same or very close, and lo and behold, I had mentioned earlier that all three of my kids are Rams. So what played out is she ended up going to CSU for her pre-med, and to this day she knows how much of a battle we were in, but she also goes, that was absolutely the right thing to do, and it was. But what I did as a parent was I engaged in the conversation. I didn't set down rules. I said, if it's important to you to go to Marquette, this is the amount we cover. There's a gap, through scholarships or whatever. You can make it up. It's your choice. So I engaged her in the conversation. It's her choice, so she chose not to do that. We had an interesting medical school is eye-opening as a parent. It's super, super competitive. So when she graduated, she applied all over the country to, a lot of med schools, and she had tremendous grades. I think she only got 1 A- in CSU, but she did not get a single interview for med school her first year, and so she was flabbergasted, and there was all this blaming, all sorts of things. Some of it was political, and some of it was all sorts of stuff, and we finally. And I listened to this, and this will give you some insight into, okay, pity party's done. What are we going to do about it? Is what I said to her, because wallowing in that wasn't really productive. So she retook the MCAT, raised it up even more, and but the key was, why don't you reach out to the schools and ask the whatever you call it, the enrollment person, admissions, for feedback, and so she did, and she went out to and Creighton University was one of her top 5 because of the program and everything, and she got a hold of the admissions counselor, and the feedback was, I have no idea why we didn't interview you. And then he said, next year when you apply again, shoot me an email and let me know that your application is there, and then I'll see what I can do to. So the lesson learned on this is, even in med school and all this other stuff, networking, #relationships matter. It was key. So she did. The next year, she was right away. She interviewed with them. They gave her early admission before she even went through with the other ones. And then she was like, tapped out. I'm done. She goes, I'm going to Creighton, because she was so burned out. But it was. But again, the finances. She, med school is different than undergrad. She was able to take out loans for herself. But she did graduate undergrad because she was able to go through in 3 years. She didn't have any debt from undergrad going into med school. Now she's got $400,000, I think, something crazy. But her story is really interesting, that she wasn't even, she was rejected from all the med schools around the country. And then now you fast forward now, she was probably she received an award for the top surgeon in her class, and won a residency that only 50 of them exist in the country, and there's 40,000 medical students that graduate every year vying for all these various positions. So and now she's a student Creighton University brags about, and it was like, I couldn't be more proud as a parent, but it was, but again, all of this, I was a very involved parent. The relationships matter. It starts with, it's not all about, you probably thought you're going to learn more about finances. You're going to walk out of here is it's not about finances. It's about the relationship with your kids. It really is. That's the main thing. Coaches teach life skills, not just money skills. So exactly what I said.
So what did your daughter do for that year in that team?
Oh, good question. So she was working at St. Joseph's Hospital. My wife is a nurse, so she was working as a CNA. She went and got a CNA, and then she got a second job working at Poudre Valley Hospital. So she was working almost 7 days a week, and then she did some more charity work. She retook the MCAT. She did multiple things to increase her application during that year. So she worked a lot, and saved up and all. But it was a tough year. So good question. What's that? Oh, certified nursing assistant is CNA. The question was, what's a CNA? Yeah, it's a nursing assistant. And I say this all the time, that coaches teach life skills, not just money skills, that it's planning. I never told any of my kids, that you need to budget and this is how you do it. You know what they did? They asked me, Dad, how do I figure this out? I feel like I need to create a budget. And I was so the difference was, instead of me telling them and being that parent that's a pain in the butt that's always asking, they were pulling it from me. They were my son, to this day, he loves Microsoft Excel. He's got his whole budget in Excel. And then my daughter and son, they use, I forget what app on their phones to track everything. So they will make the decision, but the concept of budgeting is still there, and they do investments. So instead of you professing the answer, let them ask you the question, and then you can sort of engage in the dialogue. That's what awesome coaches do. You're teaching them to have critical thinking skills with regard to. This is funny. Often I was only one day ahead of my son or daughter in teaching them about something. So they might have, and sometimes they caught me like, Dad, why are you going to the ATM machine to deposit a check? I said, what do you mean? He goes, you can take a picture on your phone now. And but there are things like that you don't have to be an expert. You can go, ooh, my son or daughter just asked me a question. I'm going to do a little bit of search on Google and figure it out, and then they don't know, right? And I did that. I did that on a number of things. So you don't have to. Again, going back to the coach, don't be scared of it. It's just the relationship is what matters the most, and know that you're gonna. I do this all the time. They'll ask me a question, and then I go, "What do you think you should do?" And sometimes they'll answer a question differently, like, well, I think I should do this, or I should wait till it goes on sale, or whatever it is. I think this is a good practice anyway, even outside of finances. What do you think we should do? And get their take. I think I should only be grounded for a week versus, and I was going, well, I wouldn't have grounded you at all, but yeah, that sounds like a good idea. So that's a tool to kind of throw it back at them, and I do this in work all the time, with people on my team. Well, what do you think we should do? What's the right design? What's the Never be demeaning. This seems obvious, but there are parents that will use the finances as a negative. Like, I'm not going to if you don't clean your room, I'm not going to give you your paycheck next month, or don't be condescending. You will get frustrated. There will be times when they overspend or whatever, but calm heads prevail. The financial teaching is not meant to be, a stick. It's a life lesson that you're coaching them. They will make mistakes. We all know this, that most of the time the true learnings happen through the mistakes than always the successes. So sometimes being there to coach them through. I had my son when he was my youngest son. He just turned 16 and he got his driver's license. And I came home and he basically cracked up the car. We had a little Honda Civic that he ran it. Well, unbeknownst to me, he didn't talk to me initially on it. I come in and he's doing his thing. I don't know if homework or watching TV. And then Mom comes home and he tells Mom, that he got into an accident. And I was like, I was kind of disappointed. I've been home for a few hours and he wouldn't. So what he did is it was a snowy day. It was like weeks after he got his license, and then he hit a cedar picket fence, and he broke through the fence, and then he fled the scene. And unbeknownst to him at the time, the license plate fell off. So the police came over, and so he's doing, he's trying to wiggle his way out of it, and he was like, "Dad, it was the snow and all of this, and it was just purely an accident." And so he did not have enough money in his emergency account to cover the cost of the fence repairs. So that was, we went over to the neighbor and confessed, and we paid for all of that, and of course as a parent I pitched in, and all this. The funny part of this story is what happened about a year ago. So my youngest son is 25 now, so this happened 9 years ago. And it was over the holidays last year, the true story came out. He was whipping around the neighborhood going like, "Woo!" and he lost control and went into the fence. And I have a great relationship with all of my kids, but yeah, they'll still lie to you at times. And but yeah, we talked through those. Coaches make mistakes too. So we were on this trip, and this is humbling. We had a minivan trip that we took up to Seattle, down the coast, and then back here. So it was a long driving trip. I got a speeding ticket in Oregon, and I don't know if any of you have been. So all three kids, my wife is in the passenger seat, pulled over by a sheriff, and they don't know what to do. This is the first time they've interacted with police, and I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to do? And everybody's quiet. The officer comes up to the van, asks for the license. It was a woman, and she was no negotiating. It was clear as day. It's family traveling in a minivan with Colorado plates on. It was screaming what we were doing, but I think it was a speed trap. So she ultimately gets the ticket, or gives a ticket, and I forget how much it was. It was a lot, and the kids are stone silent in this whole time. And then we start driving away, and Dad, do you have enough money in your emergency account for that? And so the questions and the banter starts coming in, and I was like, I don't know, so even as a coach, you're gonna do that, and just appreciate. I when I reflected on that, I was like, it was so awesome that they engaged in that and recognized there's financial stuff. Where you're gonna cover things from, but your kids are not going to expect perfection out of you as a coach either. They're going to understand. And to your point earlier, when you share, some of your financial life with them, in fact, empathy starts to develop, and, why can't we go on a vacation or, all this? I talk about learning opportunities. Obviously, I've mentioned a bunch of them through stories, but credit card companies or vacations and travel, like commercials on TV. Dad, I don't get why this Capital One card says they pay you back. How's that work? And so you or whatever it is, engage in the conversation. Explain how credit cards work. Explain how. Vacations and travel. Well, why don't we fly first class? Why don't we, do whatever? And then you go, okay, well, let's look at the numbers. Looks like we're going to drive for this vacation instead of. But if you engage them on that, going out to eat, even the charities, where they spend their money, and waiting for sales. Everything. It's everything is in your face. Billboards driving down the street, are great conversation, tools as well. But yeah, the credit cards are it's an interesting one because, credit cards now, they offer rewards and you have everybody saying, oh, you should put everything on credit. This is, and the Dave Ramsey's of the world, tell you to cut up every credit card. I mentioned I'm an IT guy. I do work with like cybersecurity stuff also. I'm from the camp that you should have a credit card. And I literally run everything through my credit card because if you have a debit card, it's easier, and I've had this happen, it's easier to tell a credit card company to remove something off your statement than tell a bank to put money back into your account. And so that was, and Dave Ramsey would call me an idiot, for thinking that way. But again, credit cards, I mean, they're a part of life. Have the conversation, work with your kids to, live within their means, pay themselves first. Those are the things, and those learning opportunities are around you all the time, and home projects, how much is, if we remodel, let's and I remember my daughter, we built a bench seat by her window. She had a little cutout for or area for this. So I engaged her in the project. Well, what's it going to cost? And so we kind of line itemed everything out. I don't know. It was probably $150, $200, when it was all said and done to do the project. But she was engaged in it. Engage. Bring them into the game. That's, again, if there's any theme on this, is bring them into the game. Share your life, your financial life with your kids, and it will be extraordinary what happens. So learning by doing, huge. That's and when you bring them into the game, everyday life, it's actually not that hard. If you turn over responsibility. I get asked this a lot of questions, and I get a lot of pushback on this. That my kids don't have time to do learn about finances. That's probably a big one. They have homework, they have after school activities, they have all of this. And I get it. I get it. My kids did too. But I will tell you, I actually think it's easier. Yes, there's that upfront, rolling out the program, but they're making the decisions. It's life. They're always going to have, metaphorically after school activities. So if you incorporate it into your life, it actually is not that hard. But I'm not going to say that if you don't want to do it, you're wrong, because every family's different. I'm just saying that I don't necessarily buy the "I'm too busy to do that" excuse. I think it's kind of an excuse. So the learning model, we talked about it. Learn by doing. This is so big. Even as adults, think of everything. Sport, learning to ski. You can't read a book and then go buy a lift ticket and learn and go down the slope. You got to learn by doing and practicing. Finances is the same way. Expenses. Let your kids manage age-appropriate expenses. The question earlier about what do you turn over, you still have a say in all of that. So use your spidey sense to go, my son or daughter is ready to take on this type of expense, and try it. There's no Becca.
Do you have a loose recommendation for credit card age?
Well, first of all, I don't know if credit cards are going to be allowed until either 16 or 18. Is it 18? What's that? Debit cards. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Okay. So the question was, what's the right age for credit cards? So I think I did the co-signing on a credit card at 18 is what I did. They had a debit card as early as 11, which functions very similar to a credit card. But as you can probably tell, what I did is I made sure that they understood that there was an account that was coming out of. I think if you just throw a credit card and they don't have the big picture and understanding, that's where the gasoline gets too close to the matches, and bad stuff happens. So it's foundational. So and when it came to the credit cards, I set. I think we had a $500 limit, So don't put it too much, and then and you're right, because I co-signed on it. It did help their credit score, and then at some point, I think when they graduated college is when I stopped. They had their own credit cards. Oh, another question is how long? When do you stop this? We stopped the program the month after they graduated high school. So, so the paying the salary part of it, So when they went away to college, that was, the landscape was, was kind of different. So, again, it's a guideline. If for you it makes sense to do something a little different, I would encourage you to take what we talked about today and run with it and make it your own. I think that's the key.
I can list out all of their expenses that they have now, but I know friends who have them put money away for like a house or for pay for the first year of college. Or I just feel like my kids have a little too much money.
That's a great question, and one that I didn't run into that as much as some other parents I worked with, and I think where you could talk about is the investing, and saving for a house or whatever, but and this is where I think Dave Ramsey gets it right, in what he says is being debt free. There's a mental freedom that comes with that, and I think having the conversation with kids about the future and saving and investing. I remember when our kids were talking, when we were talking about the investment and the 401 kids, program and dad matching dollar for dollar. It's like, oh, I could, we did talk about the power of compounding interest in that. We had a spreadsheet, and oh wow, I could be a gazillionaire by such and such, because they were 11 years old, 12 years old, and then, by the time they're 60, if they kept doing it, it'd be. I think that conversation, do you want to live in a house? Do you want financial freedom down the road? Do you want to engage in those kind of, that dialogue? That's some of it's going to be dreaming, but you still have to pay for your dreams if you want a nice house or whatever. So it's if 10% is too small to redirect, maybe it's 15% or 20%. That's probably what I would do, is to up the pay yourself first kind of thing, aspect of it. So probably not again, like a lot of this, there's not a just a black and white answer. I think it's wherever you think it would go.
What do you think about what is your opinion about when kids come back from college and they wanna save for a house? They do seem to be serious about working and saving, but they do want to live at home. Basement, back to the bedroom. What do you say? You want to help them on one hand, you want to help them save, not pay rent, and you have the room available. But on the same token, you're also taking them back and making them, you're taking their independence, but you want to give them help. It's kind of like, where's the balance in taking them back home, and when do you say no? Or how long? Like, do you give them a year or a month?
So yeah, this will give you a little insight into me. I'm kind of a softie, and I love my kids. I would probably go, come on back, and but I also know that that's not good. What I would do is just kind of put, what are the boundaries? Hey, this makes sense. For the next 6 months, or whatever. If you want to charge them rent or whatever, based on the situation, you could do that. Again, it's the if they're just coming there and don't have a plan, that's where I would get a little nervous. If they don't have a plan. But if you talk to them about a plan and they want to save for a house, like I said, I'm kind of a softie. I'm not as I talk about all this stuff and the rules and everything, but when it comes down to it, they're still your kids, and human beings, and the relationship matters. So have the conversation, but I wouldn't just leave it open-ended and just say, for as long as you want to stay here, because then maybe when they're in their 40s or 50s, they're still living at home. Does that make sense? Or, it's not you're probably frustrated because I'm not giving a definitive answer, but I am saying have the conversation and make sure that there's some guardrails. I think that's the key. And it's all right to be soft in some areas, Sometimes life lessons do need to be hard, but sometimes not, and it depends on the situation. Is there another? I thought there was another. question. Future allocations, talked about this, the injury prevention, long-term savings, charity, 401k kids, and the role of coach, learning opportunities around us. Here's the thing, a lot of us have heard this. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I really believe that you can make a difference in your kids' lives and change the trajectory of not only their near-term future, but your grandkids and the great. This is generational, type change we're talking about, and if you engage with your kids, and have these conversations, #relationships matter. You'll be amazed, and so that's what Moneyletics is all about. It's if you thought you were going to come here and learn about finances and power of compounding interest and budgeting and all of that, I hopefully surprised you and learned more about relationships and what matters more than just numbers. So, any other questions?
Well, Craig, you'll be in the back if people have questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hand to Craig. Thank you, Craig. Wow.